theory because you're only seeing top 3 to 5 terpenes. And so let's say a cannabis variety will have total content 20% THC, total content terpene average is like, anywhere around 1%. If you're above 1%, you're golden. Okay, so now instead of saying what percentage of terpene profile, like you're saying, okay, well, it's 70% myrcene, it's 10% limonene, and it's 20% pinene. And that's what's being displayed.
And you just made me dizzy.
Well, the thing is, so why explain potency in total plant, which is 20%? That makes sense. Every gram is 20%. Right? You can expect 200 milligrams of THC. Okay. And then you talk about terpene and you say it's 70% myrcene. The bud is not 70% myrcene.
Yeah.
And they're only testing for a limited number of terpenes. And there's over 350. And then imagine all those combinations.
Yeah.
So we don't know enough. They're also only testing for like the top, 12 cannabinoids, right? And they're only reporting on THC and CBD. There are other cannabinoids that are playing into your overall experience. Hence why you're talking about how do you be confident and assure others about the cannabis experience when there is a total entourage effect of, the cannabinoids, the terpenes, the flavonoids, the plant waxes. Do you combust it? Do you vape it? Do you eat it? So it's confusing. And how do you make someone feel comfortable about it? You give them a great first impression. You make them feel comfortable. I'm here with you. We're here together, creating a space that's comfortable. And you have to think different people have different ideas of comfort.
See, and that's a really important topic. And that's one that I think is like creating space is so important. I've been quoted many times as saying that we have to be very mindful of those who don't understand why legalization has happened or why people consume cannabis, people who really feel like should be still a controlled substance. Creating that space is really important. And the challenge becomes, I think, that because the plant is so complex and people forget that science is very, very important to cannabis and to this industry. Oftentimes people are still left with the impressions that it's just to get a buzz or a high or have a good time. And then people who don't know a lot about cannabis, who then start to do some initial research, feel completely overwhelmed. I still am not comfortable with my knowledge on the science of the plant part to know if a friend came to me and wanted a recommendation on what should happen. And I think that's where I think as cannabis evolves and as more and more people are trained to be like sommeliers, like they are for wine, to create that network where we can share the information. My concern, again, another unintended consequence of legalization is the restriction of how we share information.
Absolutely.
So, sometimes I think that government, in its responsibility to quote unquote protect community and citizens, creates these guidelines that are so rigid that if somebody, and I use, the example of if somebody is going to help support their elderly parent with their wellness, asking the right questions, where do you find the right answers when you're in that environment of the pressure of needing to buy something quickly? And I'm concerned too with online, when you look at the government's, retail, either their retail stores or how they're privatizing stores, none of that information is available. And it's actually being discouraged from being shared because it's making medical claims. And so that's a big concern for me on the education piece. And it's a concern for me personally, but it's also a concern for me about really normalizing cannabis. You're not going to normalize it if people don't understand it. And then forgetting that it's just not about indica or sativa. It's not just about a vape pen versus the flower versus an edible. That to honor this plant, it is a complex plant, which is responding to a very complex system within a human. But that complexity isn't being simplified yet in any way.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what? I think it's maybe our culture's obsession with science.
Yeah.
And I love science. Don't get me wrong. I wanted to be a rocket scientist.
Wow.
And one of the things about cannabis is that it is a plant.
Yeah.
It is from nature.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's a response. And Earth made it for a reason. And humans interact with this plant for a reason. And so the plant is higher than just science alone. Because for the ones that do consume cannabis, you didn't need science to tell you anything.
Yeah.
And then what you did is the safest approach for anybody is to try a little bit, a microdose. Do I react bad or not? It's okay, right? And then you can say, oh, do I feel better, worse, nothing? Okay, I'm a little bit more open to it. So it's a step by step by step. The problem is there's a lot of people that feel like they are brave and courageous. They're like, oh, like they went to the bar and I had 15 drinks, and then or like, oh, I like had this massive worm dab, and you're like, well, you know what? Just be humble. We all react very differently to cannabis, so just try a little bit. And you know what? Sometimes doing a little bit makes you feel amazing. Too much makes you feel so heavy.
Yeah.
Right?
So balance, right? Just with everything else in life too.
Absolute balance.
Yeah.
And what I mean is that once you do consume it, you feel it. And there is something about intuition. And when you can tap into your intuition, and cannabis really opens that up for you, it feels better. And same thing with cannabis people. You and I, we get each other. We get other cannabis users because there is just something about cannabis that opens you up to a connection, to collaboration, to patience, right? And happiness and support. So I think for those out there, it's not just the science is what you need. Sometimes it's having a little bit of curiosity and being safe about it and trying it.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point about using intuition and actually being open to it. When I talked about my experience, I think the edible responds in the way I need it to, right? Which is end of day, tired, a little achy.
Oh, and you work so hard.
Yeah, the back is, the back starting this, the surgery site where the L5 disc was removed sometimes in this weather and stuff. And so I think that, you bring up some very important points, which is, educate yourself. Balance is really important. Doing too much of anything, whether it's working out, eating, spending, it's bad. It's the same with cannabis use. And the other thing is that being open to the connectivity that it's going to create, right? And I really do hope that we don't change as a cannabis industry and family, because that was one of the most striking things for me as somebody from the outside who was coming in and relying on people to teach me and guide me, is that this fierce competitiveness and jealousy that sometimes grows as industries grow isn't my experience, as it hasn't been here yet.
Yeah.
There's a few things on the fringe that are just fundamental differences of values and opinions that people articulate, but most cannabis events are very welcoming and embracing. It's really about creating human connections at a much deeper level than other things. And I, hope that we can maintain that culture and that tone in this industry, because as industry gets bigger, that gets lost sometimes.
Absolutely. And I think that's why, if you're starting a business in this industry, it's important to infuse into your business core values these concepts. So the pillar of compassion is very strong in many cannabis businesses. At CannaReps, it is for sure. We start with compassion. We do this because we train others because we feel that we want to help and empower them. And whenever they come across a challenge, then we use our compassion to really help them. And we know that cannabis, the reason why we're here, why it's legal in the first place, is because it was made legal for medical reasons.
See, and that's a point we need to get across more. I think one thing that's going to happen is we're in an election year, and I'm very political by nature. I've been elected to office, so I understand that that's a completely separate culture than a lot of professions and industries. Is the challenge is going to be is that a lot of Canadians don't understand why we legalized in the first place. U.S. states that legalized it through a referendum, so the pro and con side debated it out. And we're in a situation here where we have some people scratching their head. And I think that's evident if we look at the number of municipalities that are opting out of allowing cannabis, either retail or industry, in their community. And I think that's a direct consequence of people having forgotten why the government was actually forced to move forward with legalizing cannabis for medicinal use was because the court said, hey, patients have a right to access cannabis.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think I would love to see a study 10 years down the road after legalization, what that overall impact is going to be on our economy,
yes,
right? On our cultural values, right? And if this concept of compassion and love, support, that cannabis connectivity, how that shapes our culture. So that's why I love the scenario that we're in right now, because Canada is a very powerful, influential country. And so we have the opportunity to showcase Canadian values, because I feel that we are one of the friendliest, kind people on earth. And then now we're on a stage. How are we doing? How are we legalizing cannabis? What is our expression of it? If Canada was to do it best, what does that look like?
That's an excellent point, because you're right. On the world stage, we are often used as an example of a very compassionate country. And I think the fact that we've legalized cannabis and the world is looking at us as to be the example of how they roll out legalization, whether it's in other countries in the Commonwealth like the UK or countries like Australia, or if it's countries like South America and now the Bahamas and Jamaica.
Yeah, even South Korea. Medicinally.
And who would have thought, right? Right. And I don't think that even though there seems to be this cultural bias here in Canada by Chinese and South Asian Canadians, I don't think the governments are going to be far behind at seeing the economic opportunities here, right? Yes. So I think that's really important for all of us, is to remember that we are paving a path. And so how we do that is very, very important, because if we mess it up, that might be cause for this to slow down for the rest of the world as well.
Oh, I know. And the thing is, the runway is rather short, because other countries might have cheaper land, longer growing cycles, meet different regulations.
Oh, 100%. Right?
Make it easier for everybody. More people, cheaper labor, right?
And outdoor climates to growing.
There's so many areas in the whole world where it just grows naturally. So if Canada wants to do it right, we better do it right real fast, real soon, because everybody else will catch up.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what you're doing to help advance this.
Well, I'm super proud of the team at GrowTech Labs. GrowTech Labs is an accelerator. We are funding and guiding companies who are dealing with pain points in the cannabis industry. Really important for us to eliminate barriers. So we have a stream of funding for women-led businesses, a stream of funding for Indigenous-led businesses, and then a stream of funding for anybody and everybody. And really what's important to us is that we are accelerating growth of those people who are going to help elevate the entire industry. So the first company we funded was Elevated Signals.
Oh, wonderful. They had a big contract with somebody, right?
Well, they've done extremely well. They've worked with Anandia, Blisco, and Tantalus.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's where.
Yeah. And then we announced also the co-op of small and medium producers and processors. And why that's important is because we need to honor the people who have done this right for a really, really long time. And what the co-op will allow is for a collective environment where costs are shared and risk is minimized because it's shared. And we will be bringing into the legal fold pre-legalization growers, and they will deal with the pain points of the supply shortage and the question of quality. Now, a lot of people who have been cannabis consumers or have been using it medicinally have found where they go to get their cannabis, they trust that source. They know it works for them. They have certainty. They have consistency. And that's what's missing from the legal product right now. So what we want to do is to allow those people to purchase legally the products that they've been purchasing in the pre-legalization market for years, because it works for them. And I know how particular I can be on products that I use for my wellness and the anxiety I get, even if it's something as ridiculous as my perfume being discontinued.
Yeah.
Right? And so can you imagine that if you have a wellness regime that you have gotten to after sometimes a long time of testing different things.
It's part of your lifestyle.
100%. And now it's not available. Like that is a very heavy burden on an individual to then try to figure out how to source something. So I think, we're very excited about the co-op, and really what it's about is making sure that everybody's